Guess what, Lions? For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to exclusive bonus audio content and help this program grow by joining the Lions of Liberty Pride. To learn more, head over to lionsofliberty.com/support.
Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back to another edition of Felony Friday right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Felony Friday is, of course, the show where each and every single Friday I focus on exposing injustice in this nation's broken criminal justice system. And if this is your first time stumbling upon the Lions of Liberty podcast feed, we have been running some advertisements on a couple libertarian podcasts, so welcome. If it's your first time listening to this show, this is one of 3 shows we have here on Lions of Liberty. Every Monday, we have our oldest show hosted by Mark Clare, the OG Lions of Liberty podcast, and Mark interviews leading minds in the liberty movement, hosts roundtable discussions about once a month. We call that show Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor. And then every Wednesday, we have Electric Liberty Land, hosted by Brian McWilliams. That show is your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty. And this, of course, is Felony Friday, as you know, and this is the 102nd episode. So that means you'll be able to find the show notes page with links and notes to everything that I'm going to talk about today with my guest at lionsofliberty.com/FF102. And be sure to subscribe on iTunes to get all 3 of these shows in your podcast feed. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor for today's show. We are sponsored once again by Health Excellence Plus. Health Excellence Plus is an incredible free market alternative to your standard corporate health insurance. You can find out more about Health Excellence Plus at lionsofliberty.com/health. My guest on today's episode of Felony Friday is Aaron David Seidel. I first heard of Aaron's story in the Rights for Felons forum, which is the forum that I'm the admin of on Facebook, and come and join. We talk about criminal justice reform all day, every day, so come join the conversation. I will get you approved and get you in. And Aaron posted a petition for his own pardon in that forum. And, of course, with the petition was his story. I read his story, and as soon as I read it, I knew that I had to have Aaron come on this show and share her story because it is powerful. And Aaron's story is a little bit different than a lot of the other felons I've had on this show to share their injustice, to share their struggles. See, Aaron committed a violent crime. He was convicted of attempted murder for shooting his then stepfather at the time. But see, there were extenuating circumstances surrounding this. There was abuse and all kinds of other things, a terrible living environment that Aaron was subjected to as a child. Ultimately, due to the attempted murder, Aaron was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He got the lesser sentence because the judge gave some leniency due to these mitigated circumstances that I just referenced. And after Aaron got out, he dedicated his life to self-actualization. He passed his GED, he went to a technical school, and eventually he was able to get accepted into a undergraduate program where he's very close to getting his degree. And he's going to graduate with multiple degrees, a degree in environmental geoscience and a degree in applied mathematics. And he has ambitions to go on to graduate school and join the military and all that stuff. But his options are very limited, and it's very hard to get into graduate school and get into a PhD program or to even join the military with that felony on your record. So this is why Aaron is petitioning Ohio Governor John Kasich for a full pardon, and this is why I wanted to have Aaron on Felony Friday to talk about his story, to talk about his struggles, to talk about what he's been through. So, Aaron, welcome to Felony Friday.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell my story and reach out to other people who are, going maybe similar situations or have empathy for people who are struggling with a few of the obstacles posed by civil disabilities.
Yeah, and that's what this show is all about, is giving people like yourself the opportunity in an uncensored way to share your story, to get it out there. And in your case, really sharing your story hopefully can have a direct benefit by helping you to get this pardon via petition, to get it in front of Governor Kasich in Ohio. And we've had on a lot of people with different backgrounds, with different crimes they've committed, different reasons they spent time in prison, from drug crimes to fraud to all kinds of different things. I think you're the first one that we've had on who spent time in prison for attempted murder. And I want to start off by talking about that. I guess actually before we get into that, I think it's probably best to talk about the circumstances that led up to that. So maybe a good place to start would be if you could share some about your upbringing.
Sure. I had good and bad times, I think, like anyone. But the bad times were, I think, darker than most people would experience. I didn't have my father in my life too much growing up, and my mother had remarried a man who I looked to in many ways as a father figure. And throughout the years, it was hard, very confusing seeing a man that you wanted to love and admire and look up to do the things that he did, to my mother, to myself, then to my younger brothers and my sister. And this was ongoing for 13 years. We stayed in battered woman shelters, put restraining orders, were hospitalized. And this grew up regularly with 3 days a week, having social workers in the house, documenting everything we did and always being watched. And so this just, escalated to a point, and there was just a accumulation of events over a long period of time, and in which my family reached out in every legal way possible to remedy the situation. It just help never came in the way that we needed it to. I don't look to morally justify my crime. I think it's a mistake to try and approach this topic in that way. I think that looking at a person cumulatively over the course of their lifetime is a better way to represent a person than by looking at sort of their lowest point or their minimum. And I'm asking with this pardon process that I be seen as those accumulation of events and not just based on just the low. I can't sway anyone's moral disposition as to the nature of my crime, whether it was right or wrong, justified or unjustified. I don't think that that's too much the important question here at this point. I think that the important question is the person that I am today. I wasn't given a life sentence. I was given a punishment that was considered just by a United States court, and I paid the price in full for that. And to me, justice has more faces than just punishment. And at this stage, I argue that I have been rehabilitated, and that allowing me to realize my potential will be a net positive for society, and in no way does it put the public at greater risk by restoring my civil rights so that I may pursue my career.
So was it the judge who gave you the 5-year sentence? Were the prosecutors pushing for more at the time?
No. So as everyone really is over indicted. I mean, when you commit a crime, they're going to give you a laundry list of charges, all for the same action. And, how it works is you're taken into a room and, you're read a list of all your charges and you're asked to take a plea bargain. And this saves the state money. It saves the court time, and they're able to process a larger number of inmates that way. And so we're all given a deal. However, when you're sentenced, you are, not allowed to say that you were given that deal. And so you're asked if you were promised anything. And of course you say no, but everyone was. the prosecutors met with me and told me they really weren't out for blood on this. The mitigating circumstances made everything pretty ugly, and it was just going to be a pretty drawn out thing. But at 18 years old, I didn't have the experience, and I was told that, look, you're facing 35 years. If you take this to trial and you tell your story, they're going to find you guilty on everything, and you're going to spend your whole life in prison. This is your only shot out, and you either take it now or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And so I just I pled guilty, and in hindsight, I was guilty. I was guilty of the crime that I was accused of committing, and so I don't really beat myself up for not taking it to court. I think at the time I really wanted to be able to tell my story. I just wanted it to be exposed that Children Family Services and all these other different government institutions that were put in place to protect families failed mine for a very long time. We were overlooked, and I'm not blaming them for what happened, but I'm saying that those things could have been prevented had a responsible professional or adult been involved in the situation at any point. Unfortunately, my own mother, she's a good woman, but mentally and emotionally was just unable to deal with the realities of the situation. So,
what were some examples of failures that you saw from the state services?
Well, I was hospitalized. My sister was hospitalized. Restraining orders present. My mother's countless calling of the police. All of my brothers and my sister, by the ages of 10 and 11 years old, were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and most people are familiar with that, but they associate that with soldiers coming back who've seen war and battle. To associate that same ailment to a child who's 10 and 11 years old who should not have experienced the trauma to the level that they are in need of medication and treatment for it. If you're medically treating children who live in a house with a man who's responsible for this type of distress, I will never, no matter how much time passes, look back, and I don't know who was in charge of the case. Obviously Children Family Services is not very forthcoming with the old files, but somebody just didn't do their job for a long time, and this was just overlooked time and time again.
So there was never there were never any charges brought against your stepfather?
Oh yeah, there were. They were domestic violence, I believe, countless times, and there were probations issued. I actually never looked at the official charges he received. I know that he was removed from the house numerous times. Like I said, there were restraining orders placed, and most of it, I don't like to look for people to blame. Everyone played a part in this. For a long time as a child growing up, I was very angry at my mother for allowing this, for being weak. I thought as a mother, you should be self-sacrificing, and I was removed from the home. I was taken away from the home at 9 years old, separated from my brothers and sisters, and I was sent to live, bounced around between my grandmother and others, and it was just moved around a lot, and I'd visit my mother on the weekends, and so I was, for a long time, the things that were happening were told to me via telephone, or I would go over on the weekends and see this stuff again and again. There were a lot of people that played a role in the situation. I don't think that anyone intended for anything like this to happen. Growing up and hearing these, the details of the things that were going on in the house that I was removed from, and then going back and visiting and seeing the things that I was exposed to. And like I said, my mother, very loving, but she put a lot of the burden on me. She confided in me, and I witnessed a lot of things I shouldn't have seen, from, rape of my mother in front of us to just beating her and myself, the kids. These are just things that are hard to relive. They're hard to, it's the only part of the story that's kind of hard to talk about, and mostly because it's not just my story to tell. And so I don't like to get too much into the details.
I'm not going to ask you to get into any of that stuff. We can move on, and I do want to shift and talk about your time in prison. What that was like. You're 18 years old at that time, right?
Yeah.
Which prison did you go to? What was that? I mean, what was your initial reaction to prison?
Initially I was scared. I'd never been in trouble before. And you're 18 years old, 140 pounds, and you're white. Those things all, sort of put you in a box as soon as you walk in the door. You're classified, and just the nature of that alone, you're going to get tested and tried more than other people would. And early on, I went to Lake Erie Correctional Institution in Konya, Ohio. And one of the things I had going for me is at 15 years old, I had already had a son. My son was almost 3 years old at this time. I dropped out of high school, so I'd been living on the street for a good part of 3 years. And by on the street, I mean, I rented slum apartments, whatever I could get into that didn't require having a driver's license or being 18 years old. So I got in wherever I could. And so I was streetwise. So I did have that going in my favor. But there was the initial part of my time was pretty violent. I was forced to defend myself from sexual advances. At one point I had burned another inmate with oatmeal, and I was put in segregation for 6 months. My security was raised, and that was not a good experience. Half a year I spent in isolation. I had a Bible. I think they had some old Western novels with the pages ripped out. So there wasn't much to do. And while I was in there, I just sort of meditated. I read the Bible a few times. I'm not religious, but it gave me, I was always curious about what the stories were about. And I kept busy. And when you get out and you're released into prison from segregation, it's like you feel free. It's a different season. It's a different year. And so from there, my bit went pretty smooth. I was transferred to North Central Correctional Institution, and that's where I spent the rest of my time. And the thing about prison is, there's things that follow you. Inmates know if you snitch, they're going to know no matter where you go. If you are a child molester, they're going to know wherever you go. And those are some things that are just sort of stigmas that will follow you. And likewise, if you do violent things, those follow you too. And it builds credibility or reputation. And at the North Central, I was approached by the right people. And by people, I don't mean gangs or anything like that. It was just an older guy, and called him Big Rich. He was a power lifter back from the 80s, and he had heard about me from a friend, and so he got me working out. And I spent the majority of my time exercising, eating healthy, and I started reading books. I'd never read books before, so I had a book given to me. It was by my bunkie, who was an older guy, Mr. Woods, we called him. And he saw me reading this book by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a popular book, and I liked it. But he laughed at the book, and he asked me if I wanted to read anything with real meaning, let him know. And I asked him what he had, and he gave me the Dialogues of Plato. I was not educated, and so it took me a long time to sort of read this stuff paragraph by paragraph and interpret the Greek translations. But it opened my eyes to a different way of thinking, and I fell in love with philosophy. And from that point on, for the rest of the years I was there, I read every book I could get my hands on: Viktor Frankl, Thomas More, Shakespeare, Aristotle, all of them. I took to reading. And as I read these things, it changed the way that I saw myself, my place in this world, my purpose. And overall, I began to sort of develop this way of thinking of treating the people around me according to their potential, and that would create a better reality around me. And so I went and I got my GED. And after I got that, I started tutoring and helping other young juvenile offenders from 18 to 21 read and get their GEDs. And then I started attending the college classes that were in there. And all they had at the time to offer was small business management. So that's what I took, and it sort of made my time go by quick. And, most of it, I met some good people. I saw good people there. I saw bad people there. After seeing prison and seeing university and seeing, the city streets and suburbs and countryside, and there's good and bad people everywhere. And there's no real difference, except that the system that's in place, the regulatory system is just different, but the hearts of people are the same everywhere you look. So
that's really profound. And, what you just said there about your whole story there, and really taking ownership of the direction you want your life to go in. And that's a common theme that I hear a lot of people like yourself who have come on this show who have been able to really use prison as a tool to change their life, to set themselves up for a situation where they're able to have success after prison. Because a lot of the times, there are, as you mentioned, there are some resources that the prison system does offer you, and you were lucky enough to have some mentors. You talked about your bunkie and the power lifter Big Rich, who helped you out and took you under his wing and got you lifting weights. But I mean, you very easily could have turned those guys away and say you didn't want to lift weights or you didn't want to read. It took something inside you to want to do that, to want to change, to want to become better. So I think you deserve a lot of credit for that, for taking that initial step. And I mean, your story is incredible. Everything you went through as a child, to living on the street, to then spending this time in prison. It's just a great story.
I know many of you are facing major decisions with your healthcare right now, and I want to make sure that you know about an amazing alternative to your standard corporatized health insurance known as Health Excellence Plus. Health Excellence Plus is an incredible program that helps you keep medical costs under control by taking charge of your own healthcare and not leaving all the decisions about what doctors you see and what procedures you need or don't need up to some corporate bureaucrat. Along with providing 24/7 access to medical professionals, tax-deferred health savings accounts, and preventative care, Health Excellence Plus empowers you to finally take control of your healthcare. To learn more, head on over to lionsofliberty.com/health or call the special hotline for Lions of Liberty listeners at 855-290-4447. Be sure to mention Lions of Liberty.
I want to ask you next about once you get out of prison. So eventually you ended up, you got into Indiana University of Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
How much?
Yeah.
What was the time frame? What was the time frame there?
So a few years. Getting out, I had a sweatsuit and a bag of pictures to my name. I had the chance to file for early release, and I decided not to. I decided to do all the days that were assigned to me to do. And when I was released, I had worked out with a lawyer to be placed in Pennsylvania so that I could be closer to my son. I wanted to reestablish a relationship with him and be close to him here in Pennsylvania. So here I was, and I really had nothing to my name. I had got a job through my father. It was for a window siding and roofing company. And I worked in marketing and sales there for them. And it was the only place I could find that wouldn't require a background check because, my dad worked there. So that was one opportunity that a lot of people don't get to have coming out. And during that time, I slept in the janitor. I don't say closet. It was more like a storage room. Pretty big. I had a cot, and after work I slept there and I showered and washed myself in the sink. And I saved my paychecks until I was able to afford a car, and I bought a car, and then I slept in my car. And from there, I got girlfriends and sort of stayed in their places and kept working until I had financial stability. I had credit. I was able to put my name on things. Where I started to run into problems was, trying to find a place to live. That was always difficult. Many landlords, they want not only credit checks, but they want background checks. And anyone who asks for a background check, when you have a felony like mine, you already know what the answer is going to be, because there's a reason that they're asking for it. They wouldn't go out of their way to do a background check if they didn't plan on discluding people who had that type of background. So, I've never once had a background check ran and then got accepted, no matter what it was. So I always know that that's an instant rejection. But I always went through it, and I was always honest. I never lied. I always felt to lead with that way. It was the only way to take power away from it. And so, working in sales for a long period of time, I ended up getting laid off when the company turned slow, and I lost everything. And before I had gotten out, I had dreams of going to school, and I got very negative feedback from the people around me. They told me that I was living in a dream world, that this life wasn't for us, and I'm going to go find a landscaping job like everybody else. And I haven't been out of the system yet, so, I can't talk. They would get upset that I was, they'd been in and out of prison multiple times, and they're telling me that I don't know what to expect out there, and, my dreams are going to get crushed. So, that sort of lit a fire in me to prove everybody wrong and prove this wrong, and life can be what you want to create. And this is, I started believing in these laws that I was reading about over the years. So, I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to, apply myself. So, I made a choice that I was given a second chance at life, and I just wanted to just go all out and contribute everything I could contribute to this world, and be everything I could be for my family, for myself, for my country, for the world. And that, didn't really have a family growing up, and so my way of sort of giving my life meaning, it was in the service of other people. I needed to create a need for myself, and so that's what I was trying to do, and still am. So I went to a few universities, and I was turned away. Indiana University of Pennsylvania also turned me away. And I
just to clarify, they turned you away because of the felony on your record, or was it another reason?
Initially, yes. So there are also other hurdles, like trying to get your GED records from prison. All these other things just make it so difficult. You have to, there's a series of essays, and sort of I was just getting spun. And, so I went back and I said, listen, I know, there's a process to this. I said, but I really want this. And I know that there's a human being responsible for making this decision. And if I'm given the opportunity to speak for this person, to speak to this person and articulate myself, I feel confident that they'll make the decision to let me come to school here. And so that's what they did. They put in a request, and I spoke to the dean of admissions, and she's a very kind woman. We sat and we talked the way we're talking now. She listened to my story, and she wanted to know why I wanted this. And so I told her. And she's been my biggest supporter over the past 5 years, and I've been, one of the most academically decorated students that has passed through IUP. So hopefully she feels very proud of her decision, and I'm forever thankful and grateful for that opportunity.
That's awesome. When are you on track to graduate?
So I'm able to graduate now, and I have a degree finished in environmental geoscience. My degree in applied mathematics is mostly finished. Next semester would be my last semester. However, because of my felony convictions, I'm unable to graduate and move forward. If you're familiar with Jerry Sandusky and sort of the things that happened with that.
I'm very familiar with that case.
Yeah. So the response from Pennsylvania was to, pass this blanket law that said, okay, well, to make sure this never happens again, we need to do background checks on every single person who ever comes on this campus and any campus in the state of Pennsylvania. The problem with that is Jerry Sandusky wasn't a felon to begin with. And so, this new thing that they're doing would have never prevented that situation from happening in the first place. What it is doing is taking people like me and preventing me in a lot of ways. So, it wasn't like I got accepted to IUP and was happily ever after. Being here, I wasn't able to rent an apartment in the city, and so I slept in the science lab for 6 months. And, I had money in my book bag, and I slept in my car. I slept in the science lab, and I showered in the gym. Did my laundry at the laundromat, and most people didn't know. The janitors knew, and, they didn't say anything, but that's embarrassing. And it was frustrating because I had the money, and I was turned down multiple times by landlords here. and I just couldn't get a shake. And at that point, I questioned, what am I doing? Maybe, am I crazy? Should I just go back to work somewhere and find a place where they're not going to do background checks and get out of here? This isn't for me. And I just thought sometimes life will ask you, how bad do you really want it? And so that was one of those moments that that was a turning point for me, and I just decided to push forward and push through that. Eventually I got a place, and, so that worked out, but it was just one of the things, that I remember going through and thinking, this sucks, and no wonder why so many people don't even try this, who wants to be homeless. So, at this stage, if I graduate, I'm unable to be licensed as a geologist, and that's what I would have my degree in. And so without my professional geologist license, every geology job in Pennsylvania wants a background check, so I wouldn't get hired. I would immediately have to start repaying my loans, and I wouldn't be able to do that, so I couldn't get employed. And my goals from the beginning was to go on to a PhD. And initially, my ending point is not as a geologist. This was sort of a stepping stone into engineering. My passion is in agriculture and irrigation engineering. I'm interested in variable rate irrigation. I want to work on designing irrigation systems in countries who suffer from water scarcity. And if I'm able to use less pumping power and use less water, they're able to grow more crops with the water that they have and feed a greater number of people. And looking in countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya. So those are all places that are really struggling to deal with the effects of climate change. And
how did you, just out of curiosity, how did you get passionate about that?
So it was sort of evolved. When I thought about going to school, I said, I want to do something that makes a difference. And so I looked into earth science and I looked into climate change. And the more I studied, the more I sort of got pulled to. So science is sort of the brain, and I think of engineering as the arm. And I was very interested in hands-on going over into areas that people genuinely didn't. I guess I identify as sort of an undesirable, and I know what it's like to be discriminated against and sort of not wanted from different points in my life. And I know those feelings, and I think about that there are whole countries of people like that who are taken advantage of and not wanted and sort of abandoned. And I want to I don't know, maybe give my own suffering meaning by taking what I've experienced and sharing what I've learned and my knowledge and my contribution to other people so that they too can realize their potential. I guess going to the people who need it most is sort of what pulled me into engineering. So that's the direction I'm going. And so while I'm here, I'm forced to stay as an undergraduate student for another 2.5 years while I wait for this pardon. This process takes a while. And what
is the process with the pardon? I know that there's a petition out there now.
Sure.
What's the number of signatures you need, and how does it all work?
Well, this is all my sort of idea. I guess it's my canvas to paint. My job is just to make a case to the Ohio Parole Board that I am worth pardoning. They'll make a recommendation after reading all of the letters from my professors. I have a few politicians who have agreed to give me their support. House Representative Dave Reed, Senator Don White are two, sort of advocates for me. I worked with Senator Don White a couple years ago. I founded a nonprofit organization. I read an article about Boko Haram in Nigeria, and I read about, sort of these kids who were unable to go to school and have access to educational materials. And I looked around, I said, well, I got thousands of books around here that are just sort of dusty and not being used with good knowledge in them. And so I went and started collecting books, and I reached out to the Newman Book Center, who sort of has this flea market book sale every year. And they have 100,000 books that were left over. And so all of a sudden I ended up with 100,000 books. And I was like, that's a lot for me to take care of. So I had to go out and figure out how to found a nonprofit company and do all this stuff. And so we successfully shipped over 100,000 books to Nigeria, and it worked out great. And so that sort of gave me a new energy or a new momentum to say, hey, this stuff can work. One person can really make a difference. And, I sort of pushed me and this is sort of a lull for me right now. It's a waiting game. And so to make my time useful, I've decided to pick up a third degree in environmental engineering. IUP just brought it on. I'll be the first student to take a class in the environmental engineering, and I'll probably be the first student to graduate in it because I have 130 credits, so I'm only 9 classes away from another degree in engineering. So I'll leave here essentially with 3 bachelor degrees, hopefully with my restored name. I have, for example, interest from professors at Penn State University who want to accept me but are unable to accept me because I cannot be an employed graduate assistant. You asked about the pardon process. After the parole board makes a decision, they're going to look at all the evidence. They're going to have a hearing and hear my story, everything I can provide them. The petition is a huge, I think, contribution to this because these are people who don't know me. This is the general public, and the general public that is who elects these officials. And so if I can show Governor Kasich that, this is a random selection of my peers, thousands of people who are looking objectively at my life, and this is how they feel, and they voted for you. So I think that's an important part because anyone's mom is going to say, "Oh, my son's great." That's not as special, I think, as the opinion of the public, and that's why I've decided to be very transparent about this. Because if I'm asking for the forgiveness, that's essentially what this is from society. I need to be transparent about the whole thing, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. So what can my audience do to directly help you? Because there's thousands of people that listen to this show that will jump at the chance to help someone like yourself. So what can they do right now to help you?
Sure, absolutely. Writing letters to Governor Kasich would be very helpful. Also signing my petition and commenting any feelings or thoughts that they have on this would also be very helpful. It's CARE2, CARE2 petitions. And my name is Aaron David Seidel. That's Seidel. And so if you were to just Google search CARE2 petitions, full pardon for Aaron Seidel, it would come up. And, there's a biography there that sort of briefly goes over everything. Also you contact me through the petition site, or I have a Facebook page as well. Looking sort of bigger picture, I see, once I started really looking into it, there's over 20 million people living in this country who are going through the same thing. And the majority of them are quiet. Over 6 million people are disenfranchised. They're unable to vote. That's literally taxation without representation, right? That's why this country was even founded. I've done, a lot of this research, and it turns out a lot of this sort of circles and centers around gun control and, forcing people to carry these background checks for the rest of their life, discriminating against housing, employment. My heart goes out, and I hope that, I can make my name, make my voice heard in a way that I can be a voice for other people who are just starting and they may not have a voice yet. So, I'm doing what one person can do, but hopefully, this sort of gains momentum. This is a significant portion of the population. This is, 20 million people. It's like the population almost of Pennsylvania worth of people who are unable to contribute.
Yeah, it's really staggering when you think about it, and the majority of this country has no idea that this is going on. They're completely in the dark. This is a serious problem. You have so many people like yourself that have this felon label just hung around their neck, dragging them down, and just like you said, almost everyone I talk to who's going through the same situation, the biggest problem is finding a place to live, and that's got to be something that we can solve. It just blows me away. And like you said, obviously you can find places to live, but they're not going to be maybe the safest place. You can't have your family there, so it's not obviously not ideal. But the reason I started this show, Aaron, one of the main reasons I started this show was to shine a light on situations just like yours. So I really want to encourage my listeners to. And I'll link to it on the show notes page. I'm not going to read through the hyperlink now. Go to the show notes page, lionsofliberty.com/FF102. You'll find the link there to Aaron's petition. Go and sign it. Visit him on Facebook. Write Governor John Kasich. Tweet this interview to Governor John Kasich. Let's amplify the injustice that is being done here, and the injustice that is not only being done to Aaron, it's being done to felons all across this country. So, Aaron, any parting words or anything else you'd like to point out before I let you go?
I just I think that we need more awareness and more support for this. I myself am sort of a poster child for doing everything you're supposed to do, and I'm up against the fence, and I've found the actual limits that society put for felons. I'm really up against that fence, and so I'm showing it. Look, I did all the right things, I did everything, and here I am at this fence. And this isn't just for sympathy or empathy. This it will positively affect society as a whole, letting people like me realize their dreams and potentials. That maximizes my tax-paying dollars, that maximizes my good contribution to society and the people I'll be willing to help, rather than being a draw on food stamps and welfare and recidivism rates. Like I said, justice has more than one face, and I think that we should start thinking more about the other faces than just punishment. So.
Well, you're doing great work, Aaron, and I want to thank you for everything you're doing for other people. I mean, you're doing this obviously for yourself, but this is raising awareness for the plight of felons across this country. So thank you, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you, John, very much.
Hope you guys enjoyed today's interview with Aaron David Seidel. Really an absolutely incredible story. And like I said at the outset of this show, very different than a lot of the stuff you've heard before. And on next week's podcast, I'm going to have a similar story. I'm going to have another violent offender on, someone who made some past mistakes in their life, but has turned their life around. And I think that's very important. And to talk about Aaron's story, I think it is very important to see someone like Aaron David Seidel look at the past, the past mistakes, and we didn't get into the details of the crime he committed and what exactly happened, but he did commit a violent crime. We talked about a lot of the circumstances around that, the abuse that he witnessed, the abuse that he himself was subjected to. But at the end of the day, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he served his time, and he got out, and he's made himself into a contributing member of society, someone who's ready to contribute, but unfortunately the walls are still up around him. Once you have that felon label on you, especially when you have a violent criminal act on your record, people aren't willing to listen. They're not willing to hear your story. Aaron deserves a huge amount of credit for being able to get everything done that he's done so far, getting his GED, going to technical school, getting into a college, and then he's going to graduate with 2 degrees. And, of course, he really is sort of waiting to graduate because he has ambitions to go to graduate school and get his PhD. So I really hope Aaron is able to do that. I want to challenge the Felony Friday listeners to go to the show notes page, lionsofliberty.com/FF102. There's going to be a link that'll take you to the petition on that page, and I want you to please consider signing it. And if you consider signing it and you sign it yourself, please pass it on to other people. Please pass this podcast on to your friends and family, your networks. It is a huge problem in society that once people go to prison, they serve their time. A lot of people, like Aaron, they become reformed and they come out even a better person. And they put work into themselves. They work hard to turn themselves in the best person they can be, but they are still held back by that felon label. So, things need to change, and the only way that we can change this is through education, guys. So I really want to encourage you to help to educate your friends and neighbors by sharing this show. Of course, sharing the show, that's a great way to help us grow this podcast. Another great way to help us grow this podcast is by going to lionsofliberty.com support and joining our Lions of Liberty Pride. You can join the Pride at 3 levels. The highest level is $25. For $25, you get a monthly conference call with us where you can actively participate in planning the show, ask us questions, bring up things you want us to talk about, anything you want to talk about. We talk about during that monthly conference call. Of course, you get free goodies there. You'll get some T-shirts, you get a koozie, and stuff like that. The next level is $10. You don't get the call. You still get a free T-shirt, and you still get a koozie. You get access to the bonus material, all the exclusive content that we release, and of course, you get that at $25 as well. And at $5, just for $5 a month, you don't get the freebies, but you do get all the bonus content that we produce here at Lions of Liberty, and there is a lot of it, guys. We have a conspiracy theory roundtable. One was recorded recently. I wasn't on it, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be talking about Waco, which, I'm kind of bummed I wasn't able to make it to contribute to that roundtable discussion, because Waco has always been something that really fascinated me. And really, when I became a libertarian, soon after, I watched Rules of Engagement about Waco, and that just really rattled me and woke me up to the just the amount of evil that can exist in the state. So that's going to be a great conversation. The only way you're going to hear that is by joining the Lions of Liberty Pride at lionsofliberty.com/support. That's all I have today, guys. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank our new listeners. Like I said at the beginning, we've been advertising on a couple different podcasts. So I want to encourage you, you can check out the Felony Friday archive at felonyfriday.com. And if you want to hear just the episodes that I've recorded with felons, with people who've spent time in prison, sharing their story, then you can find all of those. I've made a separate archive for that at lionsofliberty.com/felons. So check those out. We appreciate all you guys listening. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.